What we're looking at now to do with databases is queries, and these are a really important part of databases. So let's take a look at our database first of all. And here's a query designer, which is in Microsoft Access. And first of all, I'm just looking at one table. And what queries mean is they're asking questions from the database, essentially. So I run a query, I ask the database a question, and it gives me back the answer. So here I've got my query and I've got my actors table, and I want to find out all of the actors that have made films in my database. So I can take my actors field and my date of birth field and run the query. And what comes back is the result of that query. So I've got my actors here and I've got their dates of birth. What I also have, and remember that's just a visual way, this is just a visual way of designing these queries. There is another language underneath called SQL, and I can take a look at the SQL which is being written underneath here. And so it's saying select the actors from the actors table and the dates of birth from the actors table, and that will come from the actors table. In fact, we don't even need it to be as complicated as that. We can say take the actors and the dates of birth from the actors table, and it runs quite smoothly and I get the same result. Now I can do more advanced things than this when I'm designing my queries. So I could say to it, order by their date of birth ascending. So I will have the oldest first and the youngest last. And here we go. So someone born in 1908 is first and 1981 is last. And if we look at the SQL for that, similar thing. So select these two fields from the actors table, order by the date of birth in the actors table. Now I can go on to make much more complicated, and it's not difficult to make them, but I can make more complicated queries. So I could, for example, add in my other two tables. So I've got a directors table and I've got a films table. And now what it's showing me is, not only is it showing me the three tables, but it's showing me the relationships between them. So I've got my primary key here and I've got my fields down here. This is showing me that I've got three primary keys, and then these ones here are my foreign keys for the director, which links to the primary key here, and the foreign key for rating, which links to the ID for the actors. In fact, I don't think that's for rating, that's for the key star here. So the key star foreign key links to the actor's primary key here. So this then tells the SQL query how to join the tables together. That's what it's going to write there. And then I'm going to pop into here my query which I want to form. So I want to have the title of my film, and I'll put in ID as well, in fact. So I'll take the ID, I'll take my title and the year that it was made, and I'll also take the certificate and the rating which I gave it, along with my actor, the key actor, and their date of birth, and I'll also put in the director of the film as well. So let's just run that query, and what do we get? So we get the ID, the title, and exactly the fields which I put in. So queries are one way in which I can reduce the fields which result in the table which it produces. I can also hide certain fields. So in this case I can say don't bother to show it. It's as if I didn't drag it in, and you'll see that it now hides there and it doesn't show it. As before, I could order on the year the films were released, and so here I get the order in which the films were released. So that's useful in itself, but the real amazing thing about queries and where they really come into their own is that you can put criteria into them. And so I could say, for example, I only want those films which were made after 1980, and so greater than 1980. And now I get films, all of them are made after 1980. And I've got various certificates in there as well. And so if we look at the SQL that's been produced, a lot more complicated this time, but it's still just saying the same thing. It's saying get me the title from the films table, get me the year from the films table, the certificate from the films table, and so on. This inner join stuff here, which I'm not going to go into, this is to do with linking those tables together. So I've got three tables and I've got those relationships between them, and this is just the way in which it joins up the tables together. And then I've got this final bit here, which is where the year in the films table is greater than 1980. I'm just going to write that down here. So I've asked it where, and then I've said that the year, and I'm not going to bother to put in the table names, although I should here, where the year is greater than 1980. And the result which I got from running this query, this SQL, was this table here. Now I can go even further than that with my criteria. And let's say that maybe I want newer films, so I go for films that are after 1990. And I will also go for films with a certain certificate. So maybe I know that teenagers aren't that interested in Universal films, so I only want films which are going to be a PG or a 15. Or perhaps let's go with 18. Okay, so it's going to do both of these criteria. And so let's look at what it produces. But before we look at what it produces, let's look at the answer first. This is the films it produces, so it's giving me those which have 15 certificate or an 18 or a PG, and those films which are after 1990. So the query's worked correctly. And let's just think about what's going on here. We've gone greater than 1990, so let's just go back and change that. So greater than 1990 for the year. And we've said that the certificate, and the certificate is equal to, and the first one we had was a PG, or the certificate is equal to a 15, or the certificate is equal to an 18. Now the problem here is we've got these ands and ors, and if I write it like this, what it's going to say is the year is greater than 1990 and the certificate is a PG. And then it will go on and work my ors, because and takes a higher precedence and joins these two parts of the query together more than the ors do. And so what I have to do here is I have to say that the year is greater than 1990 and then I'll put in some brackets, the certificate is PG, or the certificate's 15, or the certificate's 18. And now that second part of my query, so where these criteria are met, that now works. And if we take a look at the query, which is the one which is written by Access, so if we go in, it will look slightly confusing, but we should be able to read it. And so here we're selecting everything, we're doing our joins to join the three tables together, but the key thing is here, where the year on the films table is greater than 1990, well that's what we thought it would be, so here the year is greater than 1990, and the certificate is a PG, or the certificate's a 15, or the certificate's an 18. And here's the key thing here, notice that the and, there is a bracket which surrounds this part of the query here, and there's also a bracket that surrounds all of this lot. It's put in some extra brackets that it doesn't actually need as well. It doesn't need these brackets here. But you'll see it's done exactly what we've done. It said this lot here need brackets around it with the ors, and then we've got the and here as well. And just to run that query again, so the result is we've got certificates of 15, 18 and PG, and we've got films which are newer after 1990. And this is one of the most powerful things if you ever work in SQL or you're doing back-end development of databases. It's the queries which most of the time you're writing, and they are the things which are controlling it. And beyond Access, although in Access sometimes you do write SQL queries, for things like MySQL, all the time you'll be writing SQL queries, which is the language of how you get information out of and into databases.